Okay, so I have with me today someone that you'll all be familiar with, I'm sure, who's Stephanie Davies. So just to give a small amount of background on her, she's a senior coroner's officer. She worked with Cheshire Constabulary, and it's quite well known that she worked on the Operation Hummingbird investigation. I've interviewed Stephanie previously, so after you've watched this interview, if you want to go back and watch that, she discussed a lot of those details as well. Um, We've both done a lot of stuff since the last time we spoke, so we've got a lot of things to discuss today. So, without further ado, I just say hello to Stephanie. So, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thank you, and hi to everybody.
So, the first thing as I say, we've both been really busy, and I've got loads of questions from viewers here, and I think there's no prospect that we're going to get through all the questions because we need to discuss three other things. But the first thing I want to discuss with Stephanie today is she spoke at Westminster recently. I think it was in October, is that right?
Yeah, it was. I think it was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was there. Yeah, House of Commons. Yeah.
So, can you tell me, and there's a couple of other people who spoke that I know, but could you tell me, firstly, just a bit about the event and what took place?
Yeah. So it was an all-party parliamentary meeting on miscarriages of justice, and took place in one of the committee rooms at the House of Commons. And there were four speakers, really powerful speakers. And for myself, I mean, the main topic was about expert witnesses in the criminal justice system, and I was asked to come along and speak about my experiences. So I spoke about the Wilmslow cases and how I found I had no choice but to find expert witnesses myself because the police just they didn't even read my report. And I thought I can't just leave this. I'm really concerned. So I spoke about my experience of finding my own expert witnesses and how I was later criticised by the police for finding expert witnesses outside of the UK. And then I spoke about the Lucy Letby case and how I'd reviewed those cases. And then I had nothing to do with Operation Hummingbird and my concerns on how the police almost restricted themselves to just going by the National Crime Agency list, when sometimes you may need expertise that's outside of the UK. So that's essentially what I spoke about. And it was very well received. I normally, when I talk, I tend to scan the room and I project my voice as well. There were no microphones. I thought I'm going to have to speak really loudly to make sure everyone can hear me. Um, so yeah, I think some very important people, I think, heard what I had to say. So I was really quite honoured to be asked to attend.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you did. So I think I'm right in saying that the lady from the CCRC, Vera Bird, was in attendance.
She was, yeah.
Yeah. And did you speak to her?
Very briefly, she did come up to me afterwards and say, "Well done, really good speech." It was very brief. It was yeah, literally 20 seconds, but it just meant a lot to me that she heard what I had to say. That meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that she was in attendance, and we hope that the CCRC is taking their deservedly very poor reputation seriously. They certainly should be. It seems like she has, from what I've heard a few things from a few people, but it seems like she is taking that seriously and is trying to make a difference. So hopefully she will. We're going to talk about Manchester later, but I thought it was interesting that Mark McDonald said that he knew her.
Yeah,
He knew her quite
yeah.
well. So hopefully that's encouraging, helpful. I don't know. Um, so who else was actually in attendance at this meeting apart from the aforementioned?
So Tom Hayes was there. That his was a very powerful story. Professor O'Quigley was there, and the name has just escapes me of the other professor, so I must apologise to her. It's gone out of my mind. But the theme, even though the purpose of the meeting was not to focus on one particular case, I think every speaker mentioned the Lucy Letby case and the concerns they have, and so it's like we're all in agreement. So that was really quite powerful in itself, that it was being discussed like it was a very recognised miscarriage of justice, even though the legal system is yet to catch up. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really good, really promising.
Yeah, yeah, that is good. That's very good. And I think I didn't. You mentioned you forgot one of the speakers' names. I can't remember her name either. But when I was doing the live stream yesterday, I did mention her name because I read out the Justice Gap article. So she's in there somewhere. So I have mentioned her
Yeah.
on the channel at least. But you were interviewed for that article, I think.
The person that, yes, I am in that article.
Yeah.
And it does say some of my comments that came from my speech, so they must have been present at the meeting. I wasn't interviewed separately.
Right.
That was all from my speech.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the most important thing that you had to say, I mean, you obviously said a lot. I mean, I haven't seen the whole thing. I'm going on your what you've recounted to me, but this idea that an expert is an expert just because they've got the name expert in front of them, there's very specific areas sometimes, and you can't just say, right, I'm an expert, therefore I can just comment on whatever I want. So obviously you've communicated that to this assemblance of people. I mean, do you think any action will be taken? I mean, do you think this message has got across, and do you think it's understood?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I did ask someone afterwards. So what happened with these meetings? Is any action taken forward? I mean, I have to confess, I know nothing about politics.
Hmm.
I am completely naive, and I've never been to the House of Commons. I've got no idea about these meetings that take place. I'm very, very naive from that point of view. So I think the fact that there were some very eminent people there listening, and I know that out of some of these meetings, reports can be done and then pushed forward. So I hope that something will happen. But as to what would happen next, I don't know. I really don't
Hmm.
know. I hope it's just not a group of people talking and then nothing happens afterwards.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that.
I mean, of course, that does happen a lot in politics, as we know. There is a lot of talking and then nothing happens. But, all we can do, like the fact is, you spoke at this meeting. I know John quickly spoke. I know Tom. I've only met Tom once, but I do know him. And I mean, it's three really powerful voices. It's someone who worked for the police, who the system inside out. It's someone who's very eminent statistician and professor, and it's someone who's been in prison for 7 years for a very high profile crime for which he never should have occurred. So, and then I don't know too much about the other professor, but one would hope that they would pay heed to what was said. Um, and that kind of brings me neatly onto talking about Manchester. So we've both been in Manchester over the weekend at this meeting, 19 nurses meeting at the University of Manchester. There's been a report already in the Mail on Sunday that people may have seen, but you can look it up if you haven't seen it. I don't have it in front of me now to bring on this. Oh, hold on, maybe I can bring it on the screen. Bear with me.
I've seen it, yeah.
Let me see if
Saying
I
it was
can.
in Sheffield when it was in Manchester.
Yeah,
That's
I don't know why they did that. I meant to email them and say actually it was in Manchester. But, I haven't got around to it. Bear with me. I think I can actually bring this up. There we go. So this is the Mail on Sunday article. Around 200 nurses back calls for independent review into Lucy Letby's case. So there were certainly a lot of nurses. I think there were a lot of healthcare professionals though, and doctors. I wouldn't say what the split was, but I think it may have been like 50-50. So Stephanie spoke at this event. I was in attendance, and it was really powerful. I mean, truly, if you, across the whole range of talks that took place, it was enormously powerful. I mean, I learned stuff I didn't know. Stephanie did as well. We discussed, and you couldn't go. I mean, I'm going to ask you for your take. I'm sure you'll agree with what I'm about to say, but you could not attend this meeting and then come away from it and think, right, well, the criminal justice system is fine. There's nothing to worry about. I mean, you just couldn't. It was so
absolutely.
it was so worrying. So some of the things that we heard.
It's so powerful. Every single speaker had such a powerful message. And I think you wouldn't be human if you hadn't been brought to tears almost. For some of them, some of these stories really hit home how broken the system is and that reform is needed. And it may well be that the Lucy Letby case is the one that does it, or at least starts the process, but it's needed. Too much is going wrong. And that's, I think, the take home message from that day, that it is broken and something needs to happen. But you also left the meeting with hope as well. You think, actually, there is a break in the clouds, the sun is starting to peek through, you know, change is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. So
Yeah,
yeah, really inspiring day. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I completely share those views. I mean, as well for me, it was. So I'll firstly say, because Stephanie won't say this herself, but Stephanie was brilliant. I mean, her talk was fantastic. She spoke with so much authority. And I'll tell you this as well, because I know I said this to you previously, but the stuff that Cheshire Police have said about you, there is no way anyone can watch that talk and think that you're an administrator. There's just no way. Anyone would know that you're that you clearly know your subject area very, very well. And it was a very good talk. But for me, I saw Stephanie up there and, Martin Pittman, who I know quite well as well. And it was awful for me to see what you've been through. And although you're in different fields, the thing that you both had in common is you wanted to do the right thing. You wanted to do the right thing and make sure that your department that you were working with did the right thing in a certain situation. And because of that, you lost your job and you lost your career, and you both got put through a hell of a lot more than just losing your job. So
Yeah.
for me, that was awful. Even though I kind of knew about it already, to hear all the details of it was just dreadful. And I think I can't go into details of this too much, but there was another section, and I think you will know what I'm referring to, where they were discussing another doctor and what another doctor had done, and we saw what that doctor had done. And then if you contrast that with yourself and Martin, who had tried to do the right thing and were very highly regarded, very good at your job, just wanted to set the high standards, you were very strongly penalised for that. Whereas the person that was to me, from what I saw, the polar opposite of that, has faced no consequences whatsoever for that.
Exactly. It's not right at
It's
all.
just disgusting, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that was another thing that I took away from it. But yeah, I definitely left the event with a bit more hope and a bit more optimism. Not that I was pessimistic, but I felt what Mark McDonald said made me think, there's a clear pathway now. He made it clear what we need to do, how we're going to achieve it, and what can happen. Obviously, this will all be made clearer when the video is released, which it will be. But yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about Mark speaking and your views on that, because that would be interesting.
Yeah, he's watching him speak in person. He's a very powerful speaker. Well, I guess he has to be because of his occupation. And to speak about how broken Lucy was when he first met her, that really hit home. I mean, I think he had said it before in a documentary, but it just hearing it in person, it really hit at home, and how Lucy will probably never be the same again. I can kind of relate to that, although what she's been through is worse than what I've been through. But I know that I'm not the same person that I was
No,
before I lost my job. I lost that identity
yeah,
and it really affected me. I guess now I'm finding a new identity for myself, but I'm not that same person. I'm
no,
not, I was more, I mean, I was quite sociable, but now it's a case of I keep my circle very small. I have issues trusting people because of
yeah,
people who have let me down, during that investigation against me. So I can relate, and it's kind of yeah, you're broken from what you've been put through. But then if you can survive that, then those broken pieces can start to heal, but they never heal the same way. Um, so I could relate to that, and it made me think about my own situation. But being put into prison when there's no evidence that you've done the wrong thing. It's mind blowing, and yeah, it really hit home. I don't say too much about what Mark has said. I don't know if any of it was confidential, so I'm going to
Yeah,
leave it at that.
that's fine. It'll be published. It's just I'm trying not to tread on the toes of the
Yeah,
90 nurses because they arranged the event, they recorded everything. So I've tried
yeah,
to give a flavour without giving all the details because it'll all be
yeah,
published and some of it will be on my channel as well. So um, yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I've tried to be optimistic about Lucy's state of mind and what she can be in the future, and I still believe she can be happy and fulfilled. And that, I've seen you, even in the time I've known you, I feel like you're in a better place now than when I first met you, if you don't mind me saying. So
yeah, yeah. I agree. I
yeah,
agree.
and that's really good. I mean, that's really nice to see. And Lucy can do the same, even though, as we know, she's been through an unbelievably traumatic experience. And the thing we often don't consider is that not only has she been through everything we often discuss, but she sat there in the court for 10 months watching her colleagues give evidence against her, basically. Like colleague after colleague after colleague, people that she knew, people that she worked with, people that she had strong relationships with of
Yeah,
just basically all getting evidence against her. Not just the doctor. Everyone always highlights the doctor that she had some sort of close relationship with, but it's everyone.
yeah,
I mean, this was her team, and we know what her job meant to her, and then they're just, they're not even stabbing her in the back; they're stabbing her in the front.
yeah,
So that must be really tough to deal with. So yeah, it was horrible to hear what Mark said in a way
mm,
because you want Lucy to be happy, but I mean, I think I can just basically say he said obviously she's completely lost her sense of trust because
mm,
why wouldn't you? So yeah, but nevertheless, the day ended with me hopeful that we can, that there's a legal path to exonerating Lucy, and as you say, that could be like a parting in the clouds, and it can be used to address all these things that we know are so very wrong. So, I mean, I'll definitely work in this field the rest of my life. I'm sure that you will. So,
yeah,
we've got a bit of a voice. So, and there was definitely the feeling of a campaign or a movement, steadily developing. So, I don't think it's just going to be brushed under the carpet. I think we'll be able to have an effect going forward, hopefully.
yeah. I agree.
So, I'm going to ask you now. We're going to discuss now Operation Hummingbird. So, I will share my screen at this
Okay.
point so you can see. So. We're going to go through what happened in May. So we've already kind of discussed this previously, but I wanted to go through these
Mm.
specific things. So this is on the 5th of May, 2017. So you've already looked at the cases at this point. You've looked at the cases on the 4th of May, I believe.
Yeah. So
Um,
the fifth was the Friday.
yeah,
Yeah. So I attended the my second goal group meeting that Friday morning. So, but I think this one was there. I think the police might have had another meeting in the afternoon. I did not attend that.
right. Okay. So at this meeting, they say, as part of the review, staffing was looked at. There was a notable high statistical relationship between a member of the nursing staff and babies deteriorating in the unit. There is no evidence other than coincidence. So then we move on to this meeting. So this is on the 12th of May, 2017. Um, this is held in meeting room 5, Cheshire Constabulary. There's various discussion, and they say at this stage, Countess of Chester exhausted all lines possible. There is nothing that could potentially be evidence for criminal investigation. The concerns raised by the consultants have been raised previously. There is nothing they're aware of that they would consider or believe that potential criminal offences may have been committed. So you also attend a gold group meeting around this time and give evidence on the infants that you've examined. Uh,
Not on Friday the 12th. I didn't.
sorry.
No, I did not attend any meeting on Friday the 12th.
No, no, sorry, around
No.
this time, not on this day.
Yeah. No. So the last
Mhm.
meeting I attended was the week before,
Yeah, yeah,
for the 5th. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then there's this letter from Ian Harvey to Margaret Kitching. We had a further this is his recollection of the meeting that we've just discussed on the 12th. We had a further meeting with ACC Martland, Nigel Wenham. So I know Stephanie knows all these people. An
Mm.
SIO, Detective Inspector Hughes this morning in Winsford, and the police legal advisor. They are minded not to hold an investigation. Firstly, they don't feel that there is evidence of criminal activity. And secondly, they are mindful of the effects on families. However, our paediatrician sent a document to them that was a listing of their concerns, which was a very prejudiced view, effectively pointing the finger at one nurse. So let's remember that expression for the
Yeah.
document. The police noted that it hadn't been forwarded to us also and requested that they do so. So they sent this to the police. They didn't even send it to the consultants and executives rather from the hospital. It does not contain anything new that multiple people and agencies haven't heard, despite the paediatrician's assertion that they haven't been listened to. So that's on the 12th of May. And then on the 15th, Dr. Jairam and Dr. Brewery turn up in at the police station, and as we've just discussed here in this thing,
Mm.
very prejudiced view, eventually pointing the finger at one nurse, they do exactly that in this
Yeah.
discussion that I've been over on the channel. I know Stephanie's seen.
Yeah.
So, with all that being said, I've got a few questions for you regarding this
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
So the first thing is, this is a pretty pretty banal question, but I just want to make sure that you agree. Can we, do you think it's fair to reasonably conclude from this that the police had no intention of investigating prior to the meeting with Brewery and J-Ram?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I know because when I did my review, I don't think it had that much impact at the time. And the only reason I know my review played a role was because of what Paul Hughes told me. But when he told me that, that was after his meeting with the consultant. So everything changed at that meeting. Before then, there was no evidence. They weren't going to investigate.
Yes.
And it's everything changed in that meeting. It's all about that meeting. And I don't know, maybe they reflected on my review at that point and said, oh, yeah, the senior coroner's officer has also said there's gaps. Maybe we need to look at this. Perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, that makes sense to me. It's all about that meeting.
Yeah. So I've another second question I'd like to ask you is, from the outset, it seems that Cheshire Police allowed their investigation to be led by Lucy's principal accusers, rather than treat these consultants as potential suspects, or at the very least as witnesses. You know, I know that a lot of people have said to me they should have been investigating the whole background to these two in particular. So do you think that's a fair statement? And can you share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I do think it's a fair statement. And I think the police really, they know all about motive. And did anyone ask the question, do these principal accusers, do they have a motive to pick on this person, this nurse? And yes, they did because of the recent grievance procedure that was upheld and they had to apologise. There's motive there. Why didn't the police, or maybe the police did consider that? I don't know. But there should be records where they've, documented, we've considered this as a theory, but we've managed to eliminate it or rule it out. Did they do that? And I suspect not, because they let these witnesses, so-called witnesses, potential suspects who had a motive, they let them then lead the investigation, which has introduced all sorts of bias from the very outset.
Hmm,
Yeah.
absolutely. So in you see, we obviously know now that Lucy's had this grievance upheld. Um, and Cheshire Police were aware that not everyone in the Countess of Chester agreed that Lucy was hurting babies. In fact, the majority did not think this. So it should be natural then for them to think, well, the main accusers, Lucy Letby, might not have the most pure motive, or even if they genuinely believe what they're saying, which, I believe at the start they definitely did, and I'm sure they definitely did when they went to the police station.
Yeah, me
They might have
too.
a very flawed perspective on what they were saying. And then in addition to that, there's the information of the grievance procedure being fully upheld against them. So what do you think about all of that? What should they have done? I mean, should this accompany investigation? Should it not?
Yeah, I mean, naturally they need to get information, so they're going to have to take the accounts of these principal accusers of Lucy Letby, and yes, it's a line of inquiry they have to follow, but they should consider you know, like in medicine, it's called differential diagnosis. They should consider the alternative. What if, the perception of these consultants is skewed, focusing on this one individual. In actual fact, it's tunnel vision. They're not looking at the bigger picture. And unfortunately, I think the police have fallen down that same rabbit hole. They've then gone tunnel visioned because of these consultants, and it may be that they're almost in awe of these consultants. They're senior medics. They know what they're talking about. They deal with these babies, whereas we're police officers. We don't understand the medicine behind it. We don't understand medical terminology. So in a way, these people need to lead us so that we can try and follow relevant lines of inquiry. But I think they kept those lines of inquiry too narrow, without looking at the bigger picture. And this is why I think the coroner needed an active role in the investigation, because the coroner will look at the bigger picture. The coroner is inquisitorial, and the first thing would be, okay, what has caused these deaths? So not who's done them. No, you need to get past the first hurdle. Are they murders? Is there deliberate harm? What's caused these deaths? And with that, you have to consult with those paediatric pathologists and get a multidisciplinary panel of experts, including forensic pathologists, and take it from there. But that didn't happen.
Hmm. So my reflection on this, so I'd be interested to get your view on this, is that when these people walk into the police station, like if anyone walks into a police station and reports a crime, but certainly a crime of this seriousness, the first question you should be asking yourself is why? Like, why are they doing this? Um, because I've seen situations where someone who has actually committed the crime has contacted the police or has been hanging around the crime scene and stuff like that. Um, and then that also begs the question, what would they have done? Let's say Lucy Letby had walked in. Oh, is it okay if I just make it? Yeah, yeah. There's been a crime at the Countess of Chester. Dr. Brewery and Dr. Jeremy have been murdering babies. Would they have taken that with the same seriousness? Because they basically, as far as I can see, they basically accepted the view of the consultants completely uncritically. So that would beg the question: if someone came in and made accusations about them, who was of a lower status at the hospital, being a nurse, would they have taken that as seriously? So I'd be interested
Yeah.
to know what you think about that, and also the why question. Like, surely you should be saying, why is this person here?
Yeah, I think they looked at the hierarchy in the hospital and figured that those at a higher status were almost more important, more likely to be factually correct rather than someone at a lower status. And it shouldn't be that way. But you're right, had Lucy Letby reported these doctors for harming babies, you're right. I don't think they would have listened to her. They would have just spoken to the doctors and said, "Oh yeah, it's obviously someone bitter
Hmm.
employee," which is, I think, how they've been trying to paint me. Because I guess the allegations I've made are against higher ranking police officers, and they'll just try and, say, "Well, Steph's a civilian, a lower ranking civilian. What does she know?" So
Hmm.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think it's the status of those doctors, their senior positions in the hospital, the fact that they are medics, I think that has influenced the police, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The coroner, having a lot more experience, the coroner and the coroner's team, such as myself, I used to speak to several doctors every single day about medical matters, about causes of deaths, and so whilst the coroner and coroner's officers are not medics, we understand medical terminology. We understand that some doctors are just not very good, and that includes consultants. We understand that. We know that there are some that are better than others. We know that there are some doctors that may not be honest, and they may, miss out information. And then it's for the coroner to then do an investigation, look further into potential problems, not just with individuals, but also with maybe the doctor that's reporting the death. Is there any weaknesses there? Um, so I do think that that is one of the flaws in Operation Hummingbird, that they didn't have the input of the coroner, someone who is familiar, who is used to talking to doctors, and used to doctors not always being truthful. And I think that's something that the police lack because they
And of
don't
course,
talk to doctors every day.
and of course they can make mistakes, as we know. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not just that. I mean, like they're not infallible. They're just people who've done it
yeah,
training and so they've got experience. I respect their ability, but no one never makes a mistake. There's no one out there that has never made a mistake.
yeah,
Like we shouldn't put doctors on this pedestal. Like I know quite a lot of doctors and professors now. And they're all fantastic people, but I'm sure that they've all made mistakes. That's
yeah,
normal. I just think that we need to stop treating doctors like gods because they're not.
yeah. No,
Um,
absolutely.
so I've got a question for you about the infamous Dewi Evans. Now you've spoken at Westminster about expert witnesses and the suitability of them. So we've discussed Dewi Evans in the past. Do you have any comments on the rather questionable method of selecting Dr. Evans as the expert? And we know now as well, Stephanie, the police arrested Lucy when they'd only spoken to Dr. Evans. So all this other stuff about, oh, we had so many other experts, blah, blah, blah. We know for a fact they interviewed Lucy and they already believed Lucy was guilty. Paul Hughes said, I basically believe she was guilty then when they'd only spoken to Dr. Evans. So do you have any comments on those two matters?
Yeah. Again, looking at motive, I think Dr. Evans has basically been very open about his drive for money and how he wants to keep his son in cars and his daughter in horses. Um, but I also think for this complexity, numerous deaths of babies, it should have been a panel, multidisciplinary panel from the outset, and instead there's been one individual who happens to be on the National Crime Agency expert list who says, this is my kind of case. I can help you sort of thing. Already he's got the pound signs in his eyes. And, that's a massive walking red flag. But for whatever reason, his opinion alone seems to be enough for the police. And now I can't say the coroner would have done anything different, but it may well be that the coroner might have spotted those red flags
Hmm.
earlier and said, actually, I think you need a few people looking at the evidence and then seeing what they independently come back with before confirming that these are definitely murders. But it just seemed, the second they had one person who happened to be on this expert list saying they're murders, great, let's now find the evidence to make it all fit. That's
Hmm.
not good. That's not good at all. And I think it highlights. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of experts on the National Crime Agency list that are, very good experts, and they are impartial, and they don't just fight for one side and try and win a case. I'm sure there are plenty, but I think when you've got such a niche area of medicine and the deaths are arguably equivocal, so whether the natural causes or whether the systemic issues, so medical negligence, or whether it's deliberate harm by an individual or individuals, you're looking for more than one discipline in medicine. You're looking for multidisciplinary. So why they thought a retired paediatrician was suitable, I don't know. Yes, arguably they did get other experts on board, but I think that bias was introduced when they peer reviewed Dewi Evans's reports. They should have got the original evidence first, got said to these other experts, right, here's the original evidence, see what you think, before telling them what Dewi Evans's theory was. And it just ended up that Dewi Evans's theories were rubber stamped by people that he potentially already knew. So I found that really concerning. And as I said in Manchester, I'm concerned that a retired paediatrician was allowed to not only change the causes of death, but also the manner of death. That I found really concerning, which really that should be a coronial judicial decision, not one made by a retired paediatrician.
Yeah. And so another thing is, as you mentioned, I think he's obviously questioned this, so we should acknowledge that. but I think it's reasonable to describe what he did as inserting himself into the process. And that wouldn't usually happen, would it? You wouldn't usually, an expert surely wouldn't surely be usually be selected by him pushing himself forward, essentially.
Exactly. And it seems he read about it in the paper. I mean, surely a panel of experts should have been selected before doing the press release. I mean, I didn't even know there was going to be a press release. I mean, at 1 minute I was told that my review was one of the reasons the police decided to investigate. And I think Paul Hughes was on his way to see the coroner to say there's going to be a press release, but I was never told. And then I had to, manage my team because they were like, "Why weren't we told there's going to be a press release? Have we missed something in our inquiries?" And I had to deal with that, and you know, so it just seemed the police were really quick to issue a press release before they'd actually got in place the relevant experts. And the danger of doing a press release is that you're going to attract people that are, they want to they put themselves forward for a case. Are they driven by money,
Hmm.
and or are they driven by getting to the truth? And already that is a bit of bias. If you read about it in the paper, then you say, "Hang on, I'm the guy you want." And then if you're good at talking the talk, then you get selected. So I think those are probably, I don't know, someone needs to question that media strategy, and perhaps they should have put everything in place first before doing a press release, because then they attracted the likes of Dewi Evans, who only wants to win for the side he's representing in effect, because he made it very clear he was on the prosecution side and he was going to win for the prosecution.
Yeah,
Expert witnesses don't do that.
no. Um, so I think it's interesting you mentioned this hastiness. Is it fair to describe it as hasty? I think it is.
Yeah,
To go from the 14th of May, where they had no intention of investigating, then they have this meeting on the 15th of May, and as you rightly say, it's already in the Guardian on the 18th of May. At that stage, they knew nothing other than
yeah,
the pediatrician consultants had come into the police station and said, "Oh, we reckon it's Lucy's fault." And then it's
exactly.
already in the paper. I mean, that just seems, I want to choose my words carefully, but it seems I can think of stronger words, but it seems inappropriate. Let's put it that way.
I don't know why there was a rush to do a press release. I don't know whose decision that was, but I mean, obviously, I've never been a senior investigating officer, but I think if it was me, I'd be like, I want to lay down the foundation first. I want to make
Hmm.
sure we're not attracting people out of the woodwork who could potentially have a bias looking at this case. So, I think the selection of experts really should have happened before the media release. And, I don't think he would have been selected, you know, had he
Just
not put
would
himself forward. But I don't know how they would have found the appropriate experts, because it may be the appropriate experts are not on the National Crime Agency list.
Yes, yes. I think so for me as well. I would if it was me. Obviously, I know I'm nowhere near as experienced as you, and I'm not as experienced as Paul Hughes. I don't have a high opinion of Cheshire Police, but I accept that they're used to doing investigations, and I'm not. But if it was me, I would think, okay, right, well, let's investigate this quietly. Let's see if there's any basis for this. I find it bizarre that they so quickly went to the press. One would question, I mean, that automatically would question me why they did that because it just seems so inappropriate. And then the other thing I want to ask you, Stephanie, as well is I just thought of, um, they seem so preoccupied. And I want you to clarify this because I literally don't know. But they seem so preoccupied with, oh, we need to speak to the families, we need to speak to the families. So was that like a legal or procedural requirement for them once they'd said there was an investigation, firstly?
I'd say yes. For that sort of investigation, you need to have a family liaison strategy. So absolutely, even before doing any press releases, you have to speak to all the families. But what are you actually saying to them? So I don't know if they did the press release and then I don't know. They must have spoken to all of the families. They must have got a family liaison strategy in place first, because you can't do press releases and not speak to the family. That's not right.
Hmm.
So, but when the message came, "Oh, these are murders," that must have been after Dewi Evans did his review, and that's what I don't know, because I was kept completely in the dark after I did my review. That was it. I was completely kept in the dark. I mean, which is fair enough. There was no requirement for the coroner to be involved, but actually the coroner should have been involved
Hmm.
because there was a question over determining the exact cause of death. So really the coroner should have been involved, but the coroner wasn't, and I wasn't involved either. Um, so yeah, it is good. It is the right thing to do to get a family liaison strategy in place first, have family liaison officers for however many families, and then to ensure that the same message is given at the same time. Because I used to work quite closely with the family liaison officers, especially when we investigated the Bosley explosion in Cheshire. So, and it's you have to get the right communication style. Coroner's officer is going to say this to families, family liaison officer is going to say this, and you don't want to be saying the same thing or giving mixed messages. So that's something that I imagine was discussed very early on. But it is concerning that they, at some stage, then told the families that, or your baby was murdered,
Hmm.
on the back of the opinion of Dewi Evans.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so we'll move on to questions from viewers now. I mean, I could probably ask you many more questions about Operation Hummingbird, but we'll try and answer some questions from viewers.
Okay.
I just personally think that it should never have been in the press. I mean, I cannot see any possible justification for within 3 days going from we're not going to investigate to, oh yeah, we'll put this in the Guardian. And perhaps if that hadn't happened, again, this is another fork in the road where it could have been handled differently, and perhaps that would have made a difference. But once they committed themselves to say, right, we're doing an investigation, then they contacted the families. I think there was, I don't know, this is just me surmising, but it's almost like they felt we have to do something now, and they thought they had the information to be able to do that. So then they decided, right, we'll just go down this path, and it's just a series of events that could have been avoided, sadly.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So we'll ask you some questions from viewers now. So I don't know if we'll get through all of these. We've got loads.
Okay.
We'll
Okay.
just crack on and see how we get on. So the first one is I would like to know whether the pathologist who performed the post-mortems for babies O and P was provided with details of their delivery. From what the expert panel has said, this seems to be the missing link. So we actually know the answer to this question now. So you can crack on, Stephanie.
Yeah. So, I mean, the pediatric pathologist will have had the medical records. So, and I never saw those myself. So I don't know what details are in there, if any, about the delivery. I suspect there's probably not very much. Um, and but I do know what the reporting doctors reported to us because I had my review returned to me by Cheshire Police. So, and I don't think very much about the delivery was ever passed across to the coroner. So, yeah, that's probably more missing information that the hospital have not disclosed for whatever reason.
Yeah, so just to add to that, all of the information that we've received from some very well-connected people is that they would not have received these details. We obviously don't know that definitively, but it seems extremely likely that they weren't provided with these details. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Sure.
So another question is, would the local coroner have the authority to examine why an at-risk mother, for example, with twins or triplets, had her delivery at the Countess of Chester rather than at one of the nearby hospitals with a level 3 NICU? In other words, how far geographically and medically can the coroner search for cause of death?
This could fall into the coroner's remit because it depends on if there could be I don't know, lack of facilities available at a certain hospital or unit, and that could have contributed to the death, then the coroner would have a duty to do a prevention of future deaths report. And that would go to the chief coroner, it would go onto the government website, and it would say, I'm concerned that if, there are inadequacies at this unit and that future deaths are at risk. So it could well be that, yes, there was actually a more appropriate hospital unit nearby. Mother should have gone there. So, I mean, the coroner is not really allowed to criticise or apportion blame, but the coroner has a duty to prevent future deaths, and that could fall into that remit.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Um, let's move on to the next question then. Could you tell me why Stephanie believes the original pathologist was not called as a witness in court? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I mean, for let's say it was an inquest here, because I've got more experience with courts and inquests. Not so much with criminal courts where a
Hmm.
cause of death has been changed, so I can't really answer for that.
Hmm.
But for an inquest hearing, if the cause of death was disputed, the original pathologist would attend, and you may get another pathologist who's done an independent review, and then you got the coroner who's sitting as a judge, and then that would be discussed in open court. And it may well be that a consensus is agreed that actually the cause of death needs to be amended, and the coroner will probably have the final say. Or for more, if it's like an Article 2 related case, for example, it may be that a jury will decide that. So that would be the process. And so, yeah, I would expect the original pathologist to be giving evidence. But I can't really speak on criminal courts. I don't know. I would have expected the same thing. And,
Hmm.
as soon as somebody else was saying, I found a new cause of death, the first thing I'd be doing as an investigator, I'd be going back to the original pathologist and saying, what do you think? Because pediatric pathologists are incredibly detailed with their postmortems. I think it's almost, and I don't even know, the police should know this. They've attended forensic postmortems where if it's a pediatric case, you'd have a pediatric pathologist and a forensic pathologist working together doing this postmortem. So pediatric pathologists do have that forensic awareness. They do know how to look for deliberate harm. So I think, and their post-mortem reports are so detailed, they're 15, 20 pages long. A standard coroner's post-mortem report would be about 3 pages long. And a forensic post-mortem will probably, again, be about 15, 20 pages. So they have such a high level of technical ability. I would expect them, absolutely. And if they weren't, why not? I can't answer that question.
Yeah. So there's another question that's a follow-on question. So the reality is that neither of us know the answer to this question, but I'm going to read this out and give my answer to this question. So the question is, would that not have been a legal requirement for the pathologist to discuss his post-mortem findings and his thoughts on how Dewi Evans disregarded them all? So I
Yeah,
think I can answer that question. The answer clearly is no, because if it was a legal requirement, the person would be in the court case. As
exactly.
to why it's not a legal requirement, I don't have a good answer to that question. Um,
No.
it seems that a lot of things happen in courts that are very strange, and it seems that hearing about Lucy's pajamas and Lucy's shredder was more important than hearing from the pathologist, according to the court. But clearly, there is no legal requirement because otherwise, the court this would be an unsafe conviction immediately.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I can't help thinking that an area of law has been overlooked here. So I know you say, yeah, obviously it must not be a legal requirement, but actually I think there should be. But you're right, it would have been overturned immediately, or it would have been raised at the trial. So, but I'm not a lawyer, but I can't help thinking there must be an area of law um, with regards to doing what happened in terms of the post-mortem findings.
Yeah, certainly, if there isn't, there should be.
Yeah, yeah,
I think we can both agree on that.
yeah,
So just mention with regard to Tom Hayes, who spoke with Stephanie at Westminster, his case, even though he had lots of evidence in his favour, his case was only overturned because they screwed up so badly in court. So if Lucy's case had been similarly mangled, then we could have that option of overturning it, but there has been no suggestion from anyone, including Mark McDonald, that anything procedural was incorrect and that there was anything serious enough to warrant anything that would be referred to Supreme Court or anything of that nature. So I'm only basing on that my assumption that there's no legal requirement to have the pathologist in court. I don't know that. I haven't studied law, but I'm just assuming that's the case.
Yeah.
So I'll move on to the next question. The statisticians are saying that baby deaths, where Lucy Letby was definitely not present, were excluded as data points. Given that the death rate in the unit seemed to have been rather steep at the time, might not a closer investigation of those deaths, where even Lucy Letby has not been blamed, cast more light on any underlying problems in the unit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was in the job, sometimes the police would ask me to do a search for, let's say someone died in a prison, and then they would say to me, Steph, can you have a look at previous deaths at this prison, just see if there's anything, untoward? What do you think? And so the most logical thing for me would be to, rather than focus on the deaths between 2015 and 2016, look at the other years, because that's what I used to do. Oh, there's a query about a care home. Can you have a look at previous years? And I do like reports like that for the police and the coroner. So to then only focus on certain deaths, you are removing certain variables. And I mean, stats is not my thing, but it makes sense to have a look at everything, whether Lucy was there or not. Otherwise, you're cherry picking, and again, you're being biased. So there are so many different variables which I don't think any of us were aware of previously, but they all have to be taken into account. And to do that, you need to do reviews on all of the deaths, regardless of who was there. You need to look at all of them, and then I think had that happened, systemic problems would have become apparent earlier. But that didn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to that as well, as an example, the obstetric information of the infants basically isn't in the court case at all. And as far as we're aware, based on what we've heard, it doesn't form part of the medical data on which Lucy's been convicted. So there's all kinds of really important things that have been excluded, even though they still managed to make the court case go on for 10 months. It's 10 months
Yeah,
of them. But as I've highlighted recently, essentially what happens is they each infant is pretty much structured the same way. It's the police first, the police speak first in court, and we hear about the police interviews and stuff like that. Then there are several days of interviewing people from the hospital. And basically what happens is everyone at the hospital says, oh, we had no idea what was going on. But the reason they had no idea what was going on was because they were incompetent. It wasn't a competent unit and they were struggling, basically. And then right at the end, Dewi Evans comes in and said, oh yeah, I reckon Lucy Letby did this, or I reckon Lucy Letby did that. The actual quality of evidence in this case was unbelievably poor.
yeah,
And enormous data sets that should be part of it that we've just discussed, like the obstetric information, the pathologist, the coroner, proper statistics, they're not in the case. And instead, there's this crap that we see in the actual case. Like you've all heard me go over transcripts, you've seen how bad it is. So when that's the most overwhelming argument against when people say, "Oh, but the jury were in court. The jury saw all the evidence." Well, they didn't. They didn't see all the evidence.
no,
So
no, they didn't. No,
we can put that to bed.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Um, has there ever been a check of the qualifications of all the doctors treating baby O and perhaps baby P as well? The ambiguity about what happened suggests a group of men who did not all know what they were doing. So I don't think you need to say too much about this, but if you have a view,
I can't really answer that.
yeah, it's a difficult one for us
Yeah,
to answer.
yeah,
Um, I've kind of answered it in my previous answer,
yeah,
so but we don't specifically know about that.
no,
Um, so this, if you this is you said it's okay to answer this, but
yeah.
are you in touch with old colleagues? And if so, is there any impact on staff morale within those organisations now that we know serious questions are being asked about the police investigation and the medical care at the hospital?
So old colleagues, I think of my team. I mean, within the police. I mean, okay, we did speak to some people in hospitals and other practitioners, but old colleagues no, because when I was suspended following the fallout about the Wilmslow cases, I believe I've been told that Cheshire Police gave the instruction across the police force that no one was allowed to talk to me, including the coroners. So I've not spoken to any of my old team for over 5 years. I hope they are well. I really do, but I understand why they can't talk to me. I do know how it impacted them when the first press release came out. I do remember that very clearly. And, they hadn't been warned. I hadn't been warned. Hadn't Paul Hughes omitted to tell me that press release was going out. I think he only told the coroner. So, and they were questioning themselves, have we done something wrong? Have we not asked the right questions of these doctors? And that was something I had to deal with and try and reassure them that they had done nothing wrong at all. And so I imagine that this case, I think, and also the Winslow cases, I think would have really impacted them. But I can't really answer for them because I haven't spoken to them. But I
Yeah.
imagine it would have impacted them quite significantly.
Yes.
And they may have questioned themselves, should we have realised something wasn't right? I just want them to be reassured, especially because I got my review back fairly recently. The detail that they provided to the coroner from the reporting doctors was absolutely fine. It was the reporting doctors that didn't provide all of the relevant information that I have a problem with.
Yeah, fair comment. So something I've always wondered, and I know you don't have any specific information on this, but I'd be interested to hear your view, is were there any dissenting voices in Cheshire Police? Because if I'd have been working for them and someone had shown me that note, I'd be like, hold on a second, this isn't a confession note. This is ridiculous. What are we doing? So I know you won't have specific information, but I'm just wondering if you have a view on whether, anyone can make a mistake, and I don't feel positive about what Cheshire Constabulary have done in this case, but what would you think there'd have been anyone saying, hold on, this is pretty tenuous?
I know, I mean, hindsight's a great thing, but I know if I had known about those notes, I would have said, because I do have a master's in forensic psychology, and I've written a book chapter about interpreting notes in my US colleague's book. I would have said that straight away had I known. And as soon as I saw it on the media, on the news, I was like, there's no way that is proof. That's no way that that's a genuine confession. And it's all about context. And I had alarm bells going off in my head. I was like, what were the police thinking? And the prosecution have gone with this. But had I known, had I been involved in that investigation, I know I would have said that. I would have, because my past dissertations have been in around suicide and self-harming behaviour, so I have quite a good knowledge about that sort of area, of forensic psychology. So as soon as I saw it on the news, I thought this is a major red flag. And if they're thinking that this is their strongest evidence of guilt, then I'm really concerned about the rest of the prosecution case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So another question is there any precedent for overturning previously accepted post-mortem reports? If so, what is the mechanism for doing so?
I only know about what happens with inquests, like I said previously.
Hmm.
I mean, there are some cases that have started off as being either accidental or natural, and then close examination, usually by an independent forensic pathologist, will find that no, these are actually murders, and then there's been a criminal trial. But I don't know what that procedure is. I would have thought that would be in consultation with the coroner. Now, bearing in mind, I was suspended from duty in I think it was towards the end of August 2020. So a lot may have happened whilst I was suspended. But I know up to that point there'd never been any request to the coroner to say that these causes of deaths are now changed, so the families need to be given new interim death certificates. I'm not aware of any of that happening. And I do wonder, is that what happened afterwards? Did the coroner therefore open inquests? Because it's a procedural thing that would have had to have happened. And once charges were confirmed, the coroner would then inform the registrars that, inquests have been opened, the cause of deaths are now this, and then the registrars would have been told this, and the deaths would be registered with the new cause of death. So I don't know if that happened. So yeah, I mean, again, I'm concerned about if there's been any breach of at least colonial law. I don't know, maybe, and maybe I've just been kept
Hmm.
completely out of it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, no,
Um,
that's a fair
I can
comment.
only speak for inquests, but there must be a procedure in criminal cases as well, but I'm not entirely sure what that is.
Okay. So there's a kind of follow-up question here that I know Stephanie can't answer really, which is how pathologists generally feel about this. So I'll give my view and then Stephanie can give her view as well. So my view would be that if you're in this kind of position of being a pathologist, you've got to have pretty thick skin in the first place because you're doing something that's essentially quite disturbing, I would say. Um, so I think that they must develop thick skin and they must become accustomed to criticism. Having said that, if you've reached that level of proficiency and that level of expertise, and then suddenly, and you've done what you consider to be very diligent work on a very serious situation, and then suddenly you find out, oh, well, some bloke who's retired has just decided you're wrong about everything. There's going to be a degree of how, I don't know how strongly you would feel about it, but I doubt you would be favourable towards it. You'd be thinking, but I examined the infant. Um, you know,
Exactly.
so I don't know what you think about it, Stephanie, but
I mean, I can't speak for the pathologists and what they think, but I think if it was me, I think I mean, I'd want a right to reply. I'd want to provide my own statement. They have a right to say, to defend themselves, really. It's almost like everything that's happened beforehand is just meaningless, and then it's what this retired pediatrician is now saying. That's what matters. No. I think I would want to have a right to reply. I'd provide a statement. Now, whether the pathologists were ever given that opportunity and then that's not come to light, I don't know. I really don't know. But I think I wouldn't be very happy,
yeah.
and I want to be able to have my point of view put across. I don't know if they were just completely left in the dark, like the
Well,
coroner was. I don't know.
Well, I think we can safely say they weren't given the opportunity to make a statement because in the Thirlwall documents for one of the infants, there's a document and someone is talking about how there's no in ear embolisms, one of the signatures, one of the classic signs that there's been a significant ear embolism and that is a potential cause of death, is that the patient will get frothy blood in the right ventricle of the heart. You can look this up. And there's a document from Thirlwall in which it is noted there is no frothy blood in the right ventricle of the heart. So that's a very strong indication that the cause of death wasn't an air embolism. So if they had appeared in front of the police, they could have cited that, for example, and that would have put a spanner in the works pretty quickly, for example. So I think we can say quite confidently that they weren't given the opportunity based
Wow.
on that.
Wow. Oh
Yeah.
dear. Mm.
So with that being said, we'll move on to the next question. In Stephanie's first interview, she mentioned that the police would not be happy with her Thirlwall statement. Could she expand on that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And at that point, because I'd had my review returned to me, and I thought I need to tell Thirlwall I have this piece of evidence, and they may not be aware of, and they may need me to do a statement. Now, despite my earlier doubts about the confession notes, about how the cause of death was suddenly changed, when the guilty verdicts came in, I thought there must be information or evidence that I've not heard. So I then thought, no, it was a long, detailed police investigation. It was a very long trial. It's been tested in court, and I didn't have really any strong reason to believe it was miscarriage of justice at that point. But I felt it was important that I reached out to Thirlwall, and I was concerned that Cheshire Police would turn on me no matter what I said. Now, I was concerned at the time how Cheshire Police were quite quick to dismiss the concerns that were raised initially, and I guess I relate to the Wilmslow cases because they still, as far as I'm concerned, they still haven't looked at my concerns about the Wilmslow cases. So I was concerned that Cheshire Police were cherry picking what they chose to investigate. And so that's where I was coming from in my Thirlwall statement and being completely transparent. I thought, could there be an underlying lesson here that sometimes the police need to do initial investigation first before they write off concerns. And that was where I was coming from.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I
absolutely.
thought, with me speaking publicly, I thought Cheshire Police would come after me again. I was terrified I was going to be targeted
Mm.
again, but they actually left me alone after I did my statement.
Mm. That's good. One
Yeah.
positive.
Yeah.
So another question on Thirlwall is about you handing a passage of a book to Paul Hughes. So the question was, what was the passage slash book, and why did you hand this to him?
Yeah, so I'd heard by then. So this was, let me think of the right date. I think it's around November 2017. So they'd been investigating for a few months. I think by then they would have had Dewi Evans's opinions. Um, and I was reading a book on equivocal deaths, and it was the psychology of death investigations. And it just so happened to have a chapter on healthcare serial killers. And I just thought Paul might be interested because at that time, and I don't know how I found out, I don't know if it was a rumor or what, but at that time I knew that they were treating it as a serial murder case. And I just gave him a copy. And that's all there is to it.
Hmm.
Um, to be fair, I don't think he took any interest. I don't think it would have influenced him anyway. It was just something I happened to be reading. I thought he might be interested. So there's really nothing more to it. I don't know. He may well put it in the bin after I gave it to him. I don't think it would have had any influence on him whatsoever.
Okay. So the question here about the coroner, Mr. Rheinberg. So this person, Mr. Rheinberg, the coroner, held the inquest into my sister's death. And what I can say as a direct result of experiences, when we took our concerns to him, he understood and agreed to conduct a full investigation. When the NHS trust in question wanted to use a local expert to advise the coroner, he refused. He sought out the number one expert in the world on the condition in question and appointed that doctor to assist him. He went above and beyond. I believe his conduct and his desire to get to the truth in our case were beyond reproach. The issue, of course, is that the Letby doctors never told him. Cutting through all the chase and chaff, these doctors had a well-defined statutory duty to report any concerns to the coroner and to refer the baby for a coroner's post-mortem. I just don't see how they get past that. So I know this is not necessarily your area of expertise, but I thought it's something that you might like to comment on.
Yeah, I mean that is evidence that the coroner will go for the right person, the right expert. They don't limit themselves to a National Crime Agency list, and sometimes it means looking outside of the UK.
Hmm.
So this is why the coroner needed to have an active involvement in Operation Hummingbird, because the coroner was more used to dealing with complex medical cases, and the police not so much. It's the coroner's bread and butter to deal with, talk to hospital doctors all the time and coroner's officers as well, because they gather the information on behalf of the coroner. So that absolutely is something Mr. Rheinberg would have done, and he wouldn't, limit himself. And I'm glad that he said no, a local expert is not appropriate in this case. And I think he might well have said the same sort of thing in with Operation Hummingbird, but I can't speak for him. It isn't fair.
Yeah.
And he did retire in March 2017, so it was a different senior coroner by the time Operation Hummingbird started. So, and whether that new coroner would have done the same, I can't answer that. I can only speak by what I know of Mr. Rheinberg, and I imagine other coroners do the same. They don't limit themselves to a list that's restricted to the UK or England and Wales. They say, actually, this is such a niche area, I'm going to have to look abroad, and that's the
Yeah.
right thing to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give you a little anecdote in relation to this. So Um, you may have seen some sportsmen and women wearing black taping on themselves during events. I know that it was always cited that Serena Williams used to wear it quite often, and Cristiano Ronaldo and some others. Well, I actually got met and got to know the person who invented that, and there's only about like three people in the world that know about it. Um, so there isn't anyone in Britain at all. So that would be an example. Now, whether they would ever need to appear in a court case, you don't know. But if it was specifically this specific type of taping, there's literally about three people in the world that are experts on it. And I met the person who invented it, and um, you just could not get someone from Britain to do it. So that, I mean, that's obviously a very obscure
Yeah,
example, but it does raise the question of, it's this whole thing that we started discussing right at the start of the interview. What is an expert? An expert is an expert in the field that they're an expert in.
yeah,
They're not just an expert and therefore, okay, I'm now an expert, so now I'll just start
mm,
spouting off about everything. That's what
yeah,
happened with Roy Meadow. He started to speak about something that he knew nothing about, and he wasn't qualified to speak about. For all I know, he was a good expert witness in other areas. I don't have any reason to say otherwise because I don't know what else he did, but I know he shouldn't have been talking about statistics. That's
yeah.
very clear. So it's interesting to think about all these things for sure.
I've got a cat here. Say
Oh,
hello.
hello. How are you
So
doing?
they often like check on me to make sure I'm still alive and that they're going to get their tea later.
Yeah. I can't
um,
I can't ever bring
yeah.
my dog to your house, by the way.
It made me think of like with the Wilmslow cases, which I know we're not talking about, but that I couldn't find any relevant experts in the UK about the
Yeah.
Wilmslow cases and stage crime scenes, and I recognised I had gaps myself in my knowledge, and thought, how can I present a review to the police when I'm not even trained in how to identify stage crime scenes? So that's what I did. I flew out to America, I found an expert, I got
Yeah.
trained in it, and then I was able to confidently give my opinion on those cases. So and I've done a recent literature search for stage crime scenes and equivocal deaths. There's nothing in the UK. It's very very silent. But the world leaders are in the US. They've done lots of research, followed by Australia. So it's sometimes you do have to look outside the UK. We don't know everything about everything. We need to stop being so egocentric.
Yeah, I mean, this is something Stephen Phelps spoke about when I interviewed him. It's like one of the big problems, particularly with healthcare, I think, is that we always say, due to this, like he described it as kind of like imperial empire era hangover of like, oh, we're the best at everything. We've got the best this in the world. We've got the best that in the world. And he said what happens is you start well, obviously probably in 1948 when the NHS was created, and then in the immediate years afterwards, it probably was the best. I think even when I was growing up, it had a very strong argument to be the best. But then because we assume we're the best, we then don't do anything when there's problems. If problems come up, we just say, "Oh, but we're the best in the world," and then it just gets worse and worse, and then eventually you're not the best in the world anymore. So I think there's
Exactly.
a big an element of that for sure.
Exactly.
I just say as well that when you see I presume Stephanie's talk will be put online fairly soon.
Yeah.
So you'll see her with the NYPD because that was in part of your talk. So that was pretty
Yeah.
cool. Um, let's talk about the McBurney procedure. So if the McBurney, this is child O.
Yeah.
So if the McBurney procedure wasn't mentioned in the report given to Stephanie, then why were blood and a laceration mentioned in the report? The red flag would be the bleed from a procedure not even noted. I don't understand how procedure could be missed out and then suddenly blood and a liver laceration appear.
Yeah. So, bearing in mind when I saw the post-mortem report for the ABO was what, 8 years ago, and because I was on a time limit, I literally scan read it, and it was the pathologist comments that made me think there are gaps. Now, I can't remember the exact wording, so it's hard for me to answer that. I can only go by what I remember from 8 years ago and also go by what was reported to the coroner at the time because I had my review returned to me. And this procedure was not reported. Now, I can't answer for the pathologist that carried out the post-mortem. I think I'd love to be able to speak to that pathologist or to hear what that pathologist has to say. It's hard for me to answer that fully when I can only go by the limited information that was reported by the hospital to the coroner and my memory from very quickly scan reading a post-mortem report from 8 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine. That's great. So the next questions, I think we've answered both of them, but the first one is about your dismissal. So, do you have anything to add that you would like to say about that?
In terms of Operation Hummingbird, I don't think it's relevant.
Okay.
It's to do with the Wilmslow cases. It's also to do with the Wilmslow cases. So I am very transparent about what happened, about what the police stated was evidence to use against me, and I have put that on my website about what those allegations were and my defence. Um, but yeah, but the rest of that question goes to how did they go from no case to a press statement in days and based on what? So yeah, so the only reason I know that my review played a role is because of what Paul Hughes told me. And I remember what he said in very vivid detail. And that was like in passing. We were both stood up. I think he was on his way to see the coroner. So I remember it's almost like I can press play on the tape recorder and I can
Yeah.
replay what he said. Um, but they were still, even after I did my review, they were still saying there's nothing to see here. It was only after the meeting with the doctors that's when it all seemed to come together and they were like, we're now investigating. Um, but we don't quite know exactly what was said at that meeting with the doctors. But that seemed to change everything. And I think at that point, my review was then maybe referred to. And then that prompted the police investigation.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair comment. Um, so next question is, have you had any involvement with Lucy's barrister, Mark McDonald?
So I met him for the first time on Saturday. Really nice to meet him in person. And when I had my review returned to me, and I saw the December press conference, and I found out about this procedure done on Baby O, I did inform him. I did say I am really concerned. So the hospital have not disclosed all the relevant information to the coroner. So, and that's really it. I have said I'm happy to do a statement if he needs one for the CCRC. I don't think he does need one. But the officer, he is aware. Yeah,
That's good.
it's quite limited, really, my contact with him.
Yeah, but I mean, at least we know he knows, and
Yeah,
if he needs you, you're there,
exactly.
which is
Yeah.
is a big positive. Um, Stephanie, we now know that the email dated December 2015 from the nursing manager of the baby unit to hospital management was not disclosed to the defence team by either the police or the prosecution. The same applies to the 2017 email from Dr. Joram. When Stephanie was asked by the Gold Group to give her opinion on the alleged murders, was she made aware of the sewage leaks in the baby unit, which had percolated through or were dripping from the ceiling tiles and carried a dangerous bacterium resistant to antibiotics? And the same bacterium was present in the unit's fresh water supply. So let's deal with that first.
Well, short answer is no. But when I did my review, I did look at if the parents had raised any concerns, and there were, my memory serves me right, there were, I think, at least a couple of occasions where parents were concerned about hygiene. But we weren't aware of this at all. And absolutely, that would have pointed more to a systemic issue in the unit, but we weren't aware of that. And when I was doing my review, I looked at, I mean, it's 13 deaths I was looking at. Had it been that every parent had said we're really concerned that there was a problem, then I think the coroner would have picked that up a lot earlier and then probably said there's a potential issue in the unit, but we weren't told. The coroner wasn't told this.
Hmm.
It's really only, I think it was, might have been a couple of the parents raised concerns about hygiene. Um, but other than that, no, we weren't aware. And I think that could have pointed to systemic issues a lot earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so there's just a follow-up comment. I know and you don't need to give a long answer to this because we know really, but the email was sent towards the beginning of the spike in unexplained deaths and ought properly to have been included in the files given to Stephanie. So we can just agree with that, can't we, really?
Yeah, it should have been. It wasn't. No.
Yeah. And let me just mention while we're on this topic, when John Sweeney interviewed Dewi Evans, he claimed he knew nothing about the sewage at all. So it's possible that he's telling the truth. It's maybe even
Mm.
likely that he's telling the truth. So that would indicate that this was just not part of the investigation.
It's I
Um,
found it sorry to interrupt you. I found it curious in the Operation Hummingbird, their promotional video that they did, where Paul Hughes does make reference, was it a bug in the water?
yeah.
Which makes it sound like they were aware. But have they managed to completely eliminate that? I imagine they have. And I'd be interested to see their rationale for ruling that out.
Well, I think I can answer
Yeah.
that myself. Basically,
Yeah.
well, basically, Dewi just said, "Oh no, it's not that." So
Yeah.
that's how they ruled it out. Basically, um, he claimed he didn't know about it. So if so, I mean, you make raise a really good point that that reference to a bad bug in the water perhaps implies that they did know
Yeah.
about it. So you know,
Yeah.
who's that? Who we don't we may never know for certain, but there does seem like there could be a little bit of a contradiction there.
Yeah.
And
I
just
agree.
the last follow-on question to this is just would it? I know this is hypothetical, but would it have made any difference to your opinion if the presence of raw sewage leaking into the unit water supply had been included as a possible cause or contributing factor to the spike in unexplained deaths, which coincidentally occurred at the same time?
I think the coroner would have picked up on it earlier and probably had inquest hearings, and we probably would never have got to this point. And I think the systemic issues would have been discovered earlier, in my opinion. Um, I mean, Mr. Rheinberg, I mean, okay, he retired in 2017, but he he would normally, I mean, forgive me, sir, for speaking for you, but he would normally be all over that. If he was aware of that and that there was a spike in deaths, he would have probably done something in 2015. He probably would have said, "There's something not right here. I want that unit looking at or shutting down." Well, he wouldn't have the power to shut a unit down, but he'd want a proper investigation to be done into the hygiene levels and if they really should have been operating at that level for extremely vulnerable babies. Um, so I think had we have known earlier, it probably would never have got to the stage where I then did a review. Um, it's easy for me to say yes, I would have spotted that there were systemic issues, but I don't know if I would have spotted that straight
Hmm.
away. I don't know if I would. Um, but I think it would have been apparent. I think had we been aware of all the information, I think it would have been apparent sooner. And I think a more detailed coronial investigation and possibly more inquest hearings, I think the systemic issues would have been brought to light earlier.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, it does seem that someone at the hospital, whether it's the consultant, we still don't know. I mean, I've discussed this with people in the comments. I obviously haven't worked in a hospital, and neither have you, so we're not as familiar with all the processes. But I've been told there's supposed to be all these systems that report issues back to the executives. Because I said, is it possible that the consultants and people, particularly the consultants, they're the pediatric leads for the unit, is it possible that they were keeping this quiet and the executives knew nothing about it at all? Because the executives, obviously, they're not just managing the neonatal unit, they're managing the hospital. And someone said to me, there's supposed to be these systems in place that, report back any issues and would go above the head of the pediatricians, essentially. Now, I can't comment on whether that's true or not true, but obviously it makes sense. It would be very
Yeah.
difficult to run a hospital on eyewitness accounts, wouldn't it? You need to
Would
have
it
a very stringent system in place. So,
Is that what Datix forms are for? I mean, I don't know myself what the correct procedure is, and I know that Lucy was filling those in, which may have aggravated her professional relationship with the consultant.
yeah, I mean, I
Maybe.
think it's clear most people, a lot of nurses and other NHS workers have cited this to me as a likely source of aggravation, shall we say.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think I'm right in saying someone can comment in the comments if you know differently. They very easily could be wrong about this. But an issue such as sewage, you wouldn't put in the day text because it's too serious. Like in the
yeah,
day text should be for like, oh, we're doing this wrong on the unit. we've done this procedure wrong. We need to do it right from now on. Like, for example, I know Lucy wrote, because Michelle told me, Lucy wrote quite a lot of policy and procedure. She wrote a significant amount of policy and procedure for the unit. And that even though she was an inexperienced nurse, and the reason she did that is because she'd worked in a tertiary unit, whereas others on the unit had not worked in a tertiary unit. So she was asked to write this policy and procedure and give best practice because she'd been at a higher level of hospital, essentially. So what goes into the datex are errors that are made on the unit and so forth. A more kind of overarching serious issue like sewage is more an estates issue. Now,
Yeah.
of course, then it would be if a nurse spotted this or if a doctor spotted this, whoever spots it who's working there, naturally it should be their responsibility to escalate it. But you would not escalate it, I think, through datex. You would, if you were a nurse, for example, and you saw it, you would have to go to the nursing manager
Yeah.
immediately and say, "There's
Mm.
sewage in the unit for Christ's sake."
Yeah.
And then the nursing manager will go to the pediatric lead, and the pediatric lead has to act on it, basically. I mean, even Dr. Evans is one of the very definitive, truthful statements that he's made that I agree with, was that if this happened in Swansea, he would have closed the hospital down immediately or closed the unit down.
Yeah.
So really, my question was this never escalated? But
Mm.
I've been told there are systems that mean it should be escalated. But basically, the conclusion I'm trying to draw here is that it seems to me there has been a systematic effort to make sure that the police don't receive this information because if you I know if you let's say you've got all the materials for your review together and then you've got a big report saying there was sewage on the unit, you know, you would have I mean I know you well enough to say you wouldn't have said, oh, well, that's obviously nothing to do with what's going on. You would have obviously paid attention to it. Obviously you would have done.
Yeah.
So that never
Yeah. We
even
weren't told.
yeah, so you weren't told.
No.
We don't know if the police ever knew about this. Dr. Evans claims that he never knew about this. So that all points to the fact that this was kept quiet.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would beg the question of why it was kept quiet, and I think we can all draw our own conclusions as to why that would be.
Yeah.
Um, with that being said, I think I'll move on to the next question. Is it possible, for example, that the blood samples from the post-mortems could have been corrupted between the autopsy and the Liverpool pathology department?
Hard for me to answer.
Yeah.
Probably impossible for me to answer. I guess it's always possible, but they have a set system in place to ensure that those sort of risks are minimized. But
Yeah,
I can't, other than that, I can't answer.
sure, that's fine. So there's another question here that's a follow-up. Given the poor standards of recording and reporting events, such as the doctor conducting the post-mortem on one baby not knowing that aspiration was performed on the wrong side, could mistakes have happened, whether by accident or design?
Again, very possible, but I don't have the relevant expertise to answer that. So I can't. Anything's possible,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I couldn't give a detailed answer to
yeah,
that.
absolutely. Can it be asked whether a coroner's inquest or revision is feasible, given firstly the absence of one for baby O and how many others had inquests?
So yeah, I mean, essentially, if I mean, I know that two were classed as inquests of the review I did. So that was baby A and baby D for Delta. Baby A had an inquest, and I think that was a narrative conclusion. And baby D, that inquest was towards the end of May 2017, and that was pulled because of Operation Hummingbird. Um, from what I know now, I think babies O and P should have had inquest hearings, but they were coroner's investigations, and initially Mr. Rheinberg, and I think these documents are on the Thirlwall inquiry website, Mr. Rheinberg did say this is a natural cause of death, I'm discontinuing. And I think it's my predecessor, Christine Hurst, who said, can we just wait for the Royal College report to come through first before you decide to discontinue this investigation? Um, and they were left essentially they were still open cases on our caseload when Operation Hummingbird started. Let me just look at the question again. So
Hmm.
yeah, anyway, I'm going back to the original question. So if new information comes to light following an inquest or even following any involvement of the coroner, yes, in theory, yes, an inquest can be resumed if new information comes to light. And I I personally think that there does need to be inquest hearings for some of these deaths, but I think the convictions have to be overturned first. And then I think it needs to be where it should have been at the very beginning, a coroner confirming what the manner of death is for these babies. And that to do that, you probably would need inquest hearings, very public inquest hearings. And I have informed the Cheshire coroner that I'm willing to give evidence should it get to that point.
Hmm.
Yes, so short answer, I said I've done that a very long way, but short answer is that yes, I think it's always possible if new information comes to light and
Yeah,
there's a judicial reason for doing so.
yeah, that's great. And then there's a follow-up question here as well. And even if so, in light of new evidence and world expert opinions, could a final deliberation from a coroner in each of the cases amend the rather messy circumstances that now prevail, where there are several conflicting causes of death for so many deceased children from the original pathologists and coroners through Evans' interpretations to the world expert consensus for each baby?
This is why I think new inquests are needed
Yeah.
to resolve that. It's the coroner that confirms, how someone died, and the manner of death. And this is why the coroner needed to have an active involvement. As soon as it became apparent that the manner of death was different, they really should have got the coroner's input. And it may be that there's an area of law that needs to be amended because the police, essentially, if there's any hint of suspicion, the police have primacy over the investigation. The coroner is kind of sidelined. So that is normal procedure for those suspicious deaths. But this is a very unique set of circumstances where the coroner has, in effect, given a judicial determination on how these babies have died, and then that's been overturned. But how has that been overturned? And are there breaches of colonial law there? So I think once the convictions are overturned, which I think will happen, I think there needs to be inquest hearings to really get to what was the manner of death.
Hmm.
And I think the coroner, or indeed maybe another jury, but I think the coroner should make that determination. But I could be biased because I'm from a colonial background, so I
Hmm.
could be biased. But that's
Well,
what I think.
no, but I agree with you. And something that someone has raised in the comments to me that I think is valid, of course, is what is written on the death certificates for these children.
Yeah,
And now that Dr. Evans has come in and said, oh, this has happened, that's happened, have they changed the death certificates?
I think they must have. I think as soon as there are charges, the coroner probably sent a notification to the registrar to say that these are the new causes of death. But again, if I was the coroner, which obviously I wasn't, but if I was the coroner, I'd be questioning
Yeah.
how has that been determined and what experts have you got? And this is a judicial decision that's been overruled. I'd be questioning that, but I can't speak for the coroner who. So I expect that would have happened. So we're looking late 2020 when Lucy Letby was charged. Now I was suspended by then, so I've got no idea what happened.
Hmm.
Once we had the media frenzy about the Wilmslow cases, I was put out of action, and everyone was banned from talking to me.
Hmm.
So I'm in the dark about that.
Yeah. But I mean, I think this is an incredible aspect to the whole thing that, I didn't know. I never knew. I didn't know what you were going to say then. And you say probably the death certificates have been updated or changed. So it's extraordinary when you think about it. There was a coronial decision made on these infants, and then the coroner, probably under quite significant pressure, I think it's fair to say,
Yeah,
gets instruction, all right, just change all the methods of death. Why? Or some retired pediatricians
yeah,
wandered in and
yeah.
it doesn't really seem right, does it?
No, I know. I wish I could answer that question. I wish I knew what had happened. But if the cause of death turns out to be something different, which it must have been agreed in in a course of law, that's it, they were different, then the coroner has a duty to update the registrars. New information's come to light, and the families probably needed updated death certificates. So at some point that must have happened. And generally, it's when an individual is charged, that's when the coroner will suspend any outstanding investigations, and it'll be for the criminal trial to then explore all the facts. And generally, there wouldn't be a separate inquest hearing. It would be only if the criminal trial didn't cover all of the relevant facts pertaining to the death. But now you could argue there is new information that wasn't covered by the trial. So I would argue that there is now a remit for the coroner, the Cheshire coroner, to hold fresh inquest hearings, but they probably can't do that until the convictions are overturned.
Mm.
But that is a logical next step.
Mm. Well, that's all very interesting. So next question is, was the coroner aware of the issues around the pseudomonas infections in the ward and the serious level of medical understaffing? And this person said, I read that on one day the level of coverage was one middle grade doctor and one junior doctor to cover 5 wards.
No, when the deaths were reported, no, we're not given that type of information. It may well come out later if there's an inquest hearing, but no, we weren't told about any of that.
Okay, that's very clear. So we're on the final question now.
Well, yeah.
We've done really well. I'm proud of us.
You've done well.
Yeah. So we've had a bit of a steer on this question, and it's a difficult question for us to answer, of course. But as you asked this question, I wanted to put it to Stephanie and hear her opinion. But we have had a bit of a steer on it now. How long do you think it will be before Lucy's convictions are completely overturned and dismissed?
Yeah, it's hard to answer. There's too many moving parts. There's too many official organisations that stand to be, for want of a better word, humiliated should the convictions be overturned. And for that reason alone, it can't be a quick process. If it was a very quick process, then I think that increases the humiliation for those organisations. So a slow process shows, oh, this is a difficult decision, and we've had to take into account multiple factors. So we now think they should be overturned. So I think time is inevitable, but then you have the public pressure. All eyes are on the CCRC, and then all eyes would be on the Court of Appeal. So taking too long would not look good for their reputations either. So I think it will be time. Well, it will be time consuming. It will take time. But then I think it'll snowball as soon as that we're at the next. So I think once the CCRC refers to Court of Appeal, then the pressure's on. That this is serious. So as to when that will happen, I don't know. I've been waiting since 2018 for any kind of feedback on my concerns on the Wilmslow cases, and I've had jack shit. Excuse my language. I've had nothing, no feedback whatsoever. So it makes me I don't hold out much hope. But then again, there is more public pressure on the Lucy Letby case. The whole world is talking about it. And quite frankly, the longer it takes, the more embarrassing it is. So it's already taken quite a long time. And I know it isn't fair for all those other applications that have gone to the CCRC. They're not getting the same attention, and chances are they're going to be pushed further down the list, which isn't fair on those people. It isn't fair at all, because I'm sure there are plenty of innocent people in prison that, their lives have been destroyed, and they're probably thinking, why is my case not getting this attention? Which would be a fair point. So I can't answer the question. I think we're relying on too many official bodies, and there will be humiliation. It's inevitable for how things have gone so wrong. And then there's probably going to need to be another public inquiry into why things went so wrong.
Yeah.
But we need to learn from this.
Yeah, that was a very good answer. I mean, I would echo everything you've said. One thing that you did raise was the CCRC sidelining other cases, basically. So I do know that some people that have applications in have expressed their support for Lucy's case and think it'll help them, if anything. So that is a positive for them. This is going
Yeah.
to shine enormous light on the criminal justice system and the appeal system. So, as we discussed earlier, hopefully it can be used as a lightning rod for reform.
Yeah.
Certainly,
Yeah.
that's our aim. I
Yeah.
will just mention that Mark McDonald said the CCRC may refer in summer next year. So let's say that was June as an example,
Yeah.
or July. Let's say July. So that's the middle of summer. No, it's not. August is. Well, let's say August. August, first of
Yeah.
all, is the middle of summer, isn't it? So he said from there it'd be 8 months.
Yeah.
That would be April the 1st, was it 8 months? Yeah, so then it would be 8 months to Court of Appeal. So then the Court of Appeal hearing would take place in April. We'd now be in 2027. So the Court of Appeal hearing could take 2 months, for example. That's just a guess. So
Yeah.
then that would be into June 2027. Then he said the prosecution will definitely ask for a retrial. They won't just accept the overturning of the cases. And he said it then may take 2 years for the case to be referred to court. He
Mm.
said it could be between 1 and 3 years. So,
Yeah.
so therefore, it would then go to court in June 2028, sometime between June 2028 and June 2030. But I don't think it would take as long as June 2030. Then we don't know how long the court case would be. But you're looking at 2028, 2029, perhaps. It's possible. I know people who were saying in the chat yesterday and in comments, could the CPS not pursue the case because they realise it's too ridiculous to pursue the case? And I said, I don't know. I,
No, we don't know.
I just simply don't know. They would. I mean, I said Stephanie that I think they would want to do something with a prosecution because otherwise they're saying we took this case to court. We produced 15 life sentences for this woman. It's been overturned, and we now can't even put anything together to put it back in court. So I think there would be a very strong determination to put the case back in court.
Yeah, I think so.
But having said that, if they don't have any experts, or if they have a very minimal case, and then they're already, by the time this happens, there's 29 experts now. There could
Yeah.
be 40 against them. So imagine if they just, at the moment, we heard they've got one
Yeah.
expert, apparently.
Yeah.
Probably a lot of the others may drop out. Evans won't be in a retrial.
No.
It's doubtful Bohin will be in a retrial. Some of the others, like Stavaros and Kenny, didn't even do anything. I think the likes of Sally Kinsey, I think she'd be very doubtful of doing it because she didn't really support the air embolism theory, and that will have been completely overturned by then. So it's possible that they may think it's just going to be too humiliating for us to go in there with one expert against 40. But I think
Yeah.
there'll be a very strong determination to make the case go to court because otherwise they just look utterly incompetent. So
Yeah, exactly.
based on everything I think and everything I've said, I think 2028 to 2029 is possible.
That sounds realistic.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Sadly. Yeah.
But we've all got to be here. I mean, I don't want us to bury our heads in the sand. I want us to know
No.
what we're dealing with, and we all need to be determined and stay the course and do everything we
Yeah.
can to help. And we've got to be ready to do that. So,
Yeah, exactly.
anyway, I'll let you go now. So, thank you so much for joining us today and giving your knowledge and expertise. It's so much appreciated. And thank you for everything you've done in Lucy's case. And I no doubt you'll do more in the future. And I'll just finish by finally saying that you may have noticed that we mentioned the Wilmslow cases, but we can't talk about them. But Stephanie would like to talk about those in the future when we're able to. So we hope to do that if it's possible. Uh,
Yeah, once I can speak
yeah,
more freely, yes, that would be great because that's
yeah,
really where my heart is. And
yeah.
well, I hate any kind of injustice, but that's really I can't rest until those cases have been looked at properly and independently,
Yeah.
and they're not. But yeah, we'll talk about that another
So
day.
we'll try to tell you more about that in the future. We can't talk about that currently.
Yeah, yeah,
We may be able to soon. Yeah, so thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it, and I'll no doubt speak to you again soon.
yeah.